Oh yeah, I'll check it. So we're on the food tour. Food tour.
Where did we just come from? We came from Cam Fung.
Yeah, we just went to a little Hong Kong style
eatery
restaurant. Had some really delicious pork and some chicken, duck, and now we're at a little hole in the wall type place.
Adventurous toilet place.
Yeah,
that's where we are.
So we're at our second stop now. This is a Ning Guo style restaurant. So Ning Guo is one of the lesser known cuisines we have in China. It's a small city, about a 2-hour train ride from Shanghai, a tiny little port city. So these guys, they're originally from Ning Guo. It's a little mom and pop shop, but they weren't always at this location. If you look at this sign here, you'll see multiple different addresses. Those aren't their other branches. These are all the addresses that they were at before they got here. This is their way of telling you that, hey, we're from Ning Guo, but we've been in Shanghai for a while. Like we're from around here. So they didn't always have a sign either. Like they actually had nothing on top at all. And we asked them one day, we're like, what's the name of your restaurant? And they were like, we don't have a name, we just serve Ning Guo food. And we had to talk to them several times and we're like, can you guys please put up a sign? Because it's actually hard to find you guys sometimes. We walk by and we have to backtrack. And then they were like, no. And out of nowhere one day, this was just here at night, so yeah. So a little bit about Ning Guo food. I mentioned the usage of pork in China because of how China wasn't always the most economically strong place. Ning Guo, same thing applies. If anything, it's one of the poorer cities in China. So they're known to kind of use whatever they possibly could, any and all resources. So one of their strong suits is that they take foods that you wouldn't normally put together and they use it to create a new taste that you wouldn't think would go well together.
The middle and we can just put it.
I don't know.
Detail.
No, what is it?
Oh yeah, that looks awesome.
Oh, thank you.
So it's a bamboo shoot. It's like a little baby bamboo.
Oh, this one?
So that's kelp, dried kelp and fried yellow croaker.
Oh, the fish and chips.
Yep.
Matt,
I don't know what you're talking about.
Yes, sir.
what's your favorite?
Strangely enough, I believe the kelp.
The kelp with the fish?
The kelp with kelp's kind
Just the kelp.
kelp is kind of fish. I mean, this is not kelp, right?
No, that came with fish.
Yeah, it was good. What else did we have? The bamboo shoot.
Bamboo shoots, that was good. Having fun with the jellyfish.
I'm not a big fan of jellyfish.
I like
Had it before. It was slightly nicer this time around. But yeah, not
I thought it
really.
tastes like cabbage, to be honest with you.
Cabbage is a weird one. I find the texture because it's so like you think of jellyfish, right? You want to be like, but you get it.
Ah, it's firm, yeah.
You know, so maybe it's the way they cook it, maybe it's the way they do something like that. I'm not quite sure, but jellyfish, it's not even hit or miss for me, but it's cool to eat it. Highly recommended that if you're in
And the
China.
little rice thing?
Oh, actually,
okay.
no. This was my favorite.
That was your favorite?
Yeah, no, you got me. The rice cakes. I knew there was something else out there, but the rice cakey things.
I hear we've got something special coming up now.
Sichuan food next, which means rabbit heads. Rabbit heads.
So this restaurant here is called Chili Chill. In Chinese, it's called Jiao Shou, which is kind of a pun because Jiao Shou usually means shy, but in this case they've replaced the character for Jiao with the character for pepper. So it's a play on words there a little bit. So Sichuan food is meant to be two punches. One punch being spicy, other punch being numbing. So it's actually, it comes from two different things. A lot of people might think it's all from the Sichuan pepper, but it's actually the Sichuan peppercorn and the Sichuan pepper itself. And once we get in there, I'll be able to explain more about that.
So we've got a special rabbit eating equipment. If you want to open your rabbit eating equipment.
Let's open let's unboxing
So
the.
actually, I'm about to explain that in a little bit.
Oh, he's about to explain.
So I was talking to you guys about a little bit about the difference between the numbing and the spice. So the two main ingredients in the food we're having are the Sichuan pepper itself and also the Sichuan peppercorn. This is what it looks like when it's fresh. So the Sichuan peppercorn isn't actually a part of the pepper family. It's a citrus. So for the longest time, you couldn't actually replicate Sichuan food anywhere else in the world because you couldn't actually export this particular ingredient. The reason for that was because people were worried that if you were to export this, it would carry a disease called citrus canker, which might spread into their other citrus plants, such as like oranges, limes, and so on. And yeah, so it took them until 2 years ago, I have no idea why it took them that long, to realize what you could do is actually roast it. And once you roast it, it kills off all the bacteria. So now you can actually find proper Sichuan food overseas. Although the numbingness will be not as strong as you would find it here. So the numbing taste you guys are gonna feel is about 50 hertz. That's the same as the Shanghai power grid. So if you guys ever wondered what it's like to lick a power grid, there you go. So yeah, but it doesn't actually give you any spice flavoring. If you try this on its own, it will only numb your tongue. So they actually used to use this at a dentist's office in China. Yeah, so the first thing we're having here is the rabbit's head, which will be coming shortly. A little bit about the rabbit's head. A lot of people might think this might be like a really ancient dish, but it's actually relatively new. It came about around 100 years ago. The story goes there was a little boy who loved eating mala, so like half numb, half spicy rabbit. And his mom would prepare it for him every day after school. So when he got home, it would just be rabbit ready for him. One day she forgot and she was in a rush, accidentally brushed the entire rabbit into the pot, including the head. And so the little boy came home and obviously the mom couldn't make another one in time. So he just dug right in. First thing he pulled out was the rabbit's head and he was like, I'll give it a shot. Tried it, thought it was amazing, and word spread, and now everyone's having it in Sichuan. It's actually a very common dish there. It's actually so highly demanded that 20% of the rabbit heads they consume have to be imported from France or Italy, as they eat rabbits there, but not the rabbit's head. It's easy for them to just let that go.
Oh yeah. Oh, this is the rabbit's head.
Have it up like this, mouth pointing upwards, okay? And then we're gonna get right down to it. We're gonna put 2 fingers on each jaw, and we're gonna rip it right down the middle like that. Oh yeah. So you get 2 sides of the, do you guys wanna do it while we're doing it?
Matt, rip your head open.
You want me to do it now?
Actually, Amy.
Mouth up, neck.
Help her film.
Please help me, don't eat me.
That's okay, it's all good.
Oh, okay.
Beautiful.
So we just smashed the rabbit's head. My mouth's a little numb. Turns out the eyes and the brain are actually really, really tasty, quite soft and squishy, but that flavor's really good. It kind of sits with you, right? What's your thoughts on the brain? The rabbit's head.
Rabbit head. I'm lost for words. There's a level of excitement I felt whilst demolishing and destroying this rabbit head. And it was just, I'm in another plane right now, man.
It's good rabbit, man.
It's good rabbit. Like, if you ever get a chance to eat a rabbit head, Sichuan style.
Eat some rabbit.
A Shanghai style diner, so it has a lot of similar elements, but some differences as well, as obviously. So when we go in, I'm going to talk more about it. We're using fake flour, so there's a massive scandal. And ever since that, they started cracking down in Shanghai, and every restaurant has to have a camera facing the kitchen where you can see everything they're doing. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know too much about it, but that's like the extent of the story to which I know. But yeah, so right now we are in, as I mentioned, a Shanghai style diner. So little backtrack, around 1849, I told you guys that Hong Kong was ceded to China. But beyond that, lesser known fact, part of Shanghai was also ceded to the British as well. So the Bund, which you guys might be familiar with, that's actually a part of the British concession back in the day. Now, shortly after the British claimed a piece of land here in Shanghai, the French came in and they said, hey, if the British get a piece of land, we want a piece of land too. And China, having just lost a devastating war, realized it wasn't a smart idea to go to war again. So they pretty much just gridded off a piece of land to the French. So back in the day, you had the French concession, the British concession, eventually the American concession as well, which eventually the British and Americans joined and became the international settlement. So because of that, there were a lot of Europeans and Western countries that came here to Shanghai. One of them are the Germans, which is significant in just a little bit when the food comes out. But yeah, as you guys can see, if you look around, it's got some Chinese touches to it, but it's also got a really Western vibe in here. This is one of the oldest diners we have here in Shanghai. You guys can see the homage of back in the day. This is this restaurant about like 100 years ago. Yeah. So we'll be having some Shanghainese traditional food here. One of them is Xiao Long Bao, which is soup dumpling, which Amy's shirt has been hinting at all day. Mine as well. But yeah, another thing we'll be having here is something that looks similar to a schnitzel, but it has a bone in it, so it's basically a fried pork cutlet, and we'll be having some vegetables as well, and I'll talk more about it when it comes out. So this is very similar to the German schnitzel. The only difference is that the German schnitzel does not have a bone in it, where here in Shanghai they've gone ahead and left the pork bone in there. The reason for that is because in China they like to keep the meat on the bone so that you know it's from like a live animal. I'm not sure what else it could be from, but what we have is a sauce. This is the Worcestershire sauce. I always struggle with that one. And vinegar mixed together. So I would highly recommend dipping that pork into the sauce as well. Demonstrate how to eat these real quick. The reason for that is because there is soup on the inside, and it does squirt out if you don't eat it properly. Usually it lands on the person wearing white. I think we're good tonight. Yeah, so the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna use these tiny little dishes we have in front of us, and we're gonna pour some vinegar in it. That's this right here. So if you guys look at the dumpling, you'll notice that there's this swirl at the top. That's where the fold of the dumpling is, also known as where the dumpling is at its strongest. So what you want to do is you want to pick it up by that fold right there. And we've also gone ahead and put spoons in front of you guys. That may help. You want to go ahead and put it in your spoon. This helps you, leverage it a little bit. Then you're going to tilt it to the side. You're going to take a small bite on the side of it, like that. You're going to make a tiny little hole. And then you're going to slurp. Now I know slurping's kind of against most people's habits, but there's a scientific reason to why we're slurping. The louder you slurp, the more air you're actually letting into it, thus cooling off the soup. So you want to go. Once you've done that, you want to take that hole right there and you want to dip it into the vinegar and scoop some of the vinegar into the dumpling. That cools off the meat on the inside, and then you can go ahead and voila. So it's very much so a Shanghainese dumpling. The other reason it's controversial is because some people might say the best one ever created exists at Din Tai Fung. So Din Tai Fung, you have it in Hong Kong, LA, you have it in Sydney, all over the place. It's the most international soup dumpling there is out there. But why is that so controversial? Because this is originally a Shanghai recipe, and the story goes, there was a man from Anhui, a 6-hour drive north of Shanghai. He came down to Shanghai and tried these dumplings, loved it, took the recipe, migrated to Taiwan and opened a restaurant there called Din Tai Fung. And of course, people in Taiwan had never tried this dumpling before, so all of a sudden it spread and he started opening up shops all over Taiwan. Then he was like, I'm gonna take this international. So he went to Hong Kong, and he opened his first overseas one in Hong Kong, where they achieved 2 Michelin stars. Now they got the 2 Michelin stars because when you look at the soup inside their soup dumpling, it is the cleanest soup you'll probably find coming out of this dumpling. So this soup is actually made from pork skin. What they do is they boil down pork skin for several hours until you get this collagen. This collagen, when it's above room temperature, will be a soup, but when it's below room temperature, it clots up into a gelatin. So what they've done is they've taken this gelatin, they put it in the fridge, and when they're wrapping these dumplings, they scoop out a little bit of that gelatin, frozen, and they put it into the meat, so when they steam it, it melts into a soup. Now what they've done at Din Tai Fung is they've figured out a way to filter out all the little fat bits so that it's a clear soup. It kind of looks a little bit like this. So I taught you guys the Shanghainese way where you have to slurp from the dumplings. In Din Tai Fung, what they'll tell you to do is put it in your spoon, poke a hole on the side, the soup comes out, you eat the dumpling, look at how clean their soup is, and then drink the soup. So that's why this is a controversial dumpling. But what we're having right now is very similar to what you will get from its origin, Nanchang.